Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to chat with you more about what does pursuing a concurrent degree look like, along with the Masters of Social Work at the School of Social Work at UW. So yeah, we'll get right into it. So welcome, everyone. My name is Carol Din. I use she and they pronouns. I am the Assistant Director of Outreach and Admissions, and I'm here joined by two wonderful colleagues in Student Services, and I'll have them introduce themselves.
Everyone, my name is Janae Carpio, and I use she, her pronouns. I am the MSW Academic Advisor at the Student Services at the School of Social Work. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aaliyah Vinacore, and I'm the Assistant Director of MSW Programs at the School of Social Work. So more big picture oversight of the MSW program, making sure that our students are really satisfied and having a successful experience in their coursework and in their field work at the school. And I previously advised our dual degree students, so that's why I'm joining tonight.
Awesome. Okay, so today is our agenda, pretty straightforward in terms of what we're going to cover. At the end of the session, we will have an open Q&A, so don't hesitate to ask your questions, and we really encourage it. All right, first step. Just as a quick introduction to concurrent degrees at UW, the way it works at the University of Washington is there is no formal track. So it's not like when you apply, you're like, I'm going to declare MSW and another degree, right? You kind of have to get into both programs first and then be able to declare that status afterwards. Which really brings back to the question of like, ultimately, like, what is it that you want to do and what degrees do you really need, right? Because there are pros and cons to pursuing a concurrent degree at UW.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in a little bit with some context. So we're a pretty big school at the School of Social Work. We have 700 students between our undergraduate, graduate, and PhD programs. And Carol would know better how many MSW students we have right now, but it's definitely upwards of 600. And of those students, we have at any given time around 15 concurrent degrees. Degree students. So it's a small percentage of our overall MSW population. And I think that's because it's a really rigorous experience to be taking coursework in both the MSW and another degree on campus. There's some overlap. We can credit share a small amount of courses. Typically our research courses and our elective courses we can take from our sister programs. But it really is shaving off maybe just 2 quarters of your program of study. So whereas a program of study for, let's say, an MPA and an MSW would typically be 4 years if it was done sequentially. If it's done concurrently, it can be done in 3 years, including summers. So that's typically how it works. The most common dual degree paths are with the School of Public Health, so an MPH and an MSW, and the Evans School of Public Policy and Governance, so an MPA and an MSW. Every year we have maybe 1 or 2 students who do another master's degree and an MSW, but again, it's really complicated, and we'll talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of doing this in just a few minutes.
Perfect. Thank you, Leah. So if you haven't been to any of our sessions, this will be new to you. If you have been, thank you so much for still engaging with us. But essentially, why an MSW, right? Our program at UW is one of the top ones, being number 3. And then we have all of these amazing partnerships as well as different practicum experiences. I'm also really proud to say that our faculty and our administration really do care about your experience and really do care about your success and, what is it that you're looking for in terms of your career, right? With that said, these are probably one of the, collecting what are the best parts about our program. 60% of our students do receive scholarships. We know how expensive grad school is, and our goal for many years now is making sure that we are able to provide that affordability some way, right, through funding, through scholarships, and et cetera. We also have available funding for current students. So let's say you apply, you get in, and then as you are going into your second year, there's another opportunity to apply for more funding with us. So we are very, very intentional about that. Another thing is we have a Latinx specialization, which is really focused on those who are really passionate about serving the Latinx communities and just getting that extra umph, particularly in that community and that expertise. And then some brief demographics. This is something that we are also still very proud of. We are extremely diverse, one of the most diverse departments on UW actually. And then these are other statistics, mostly because we get a lot of questions about it. But again, these are just averages. This does not mean that, it doesn't mean that you're not going to get in if you don't fit a specific number, but rather that's just kind of for you to gauge where we are at. And then something that I'm also really proud of is we do truly employ a holistic review of admissions, which means there's no part of your application that we weigh more, right? Like, it's not like we look at your GPA and be like, yes, this weighs more. We really do look at every part of your application and weigh in to make that decision of admission offer. And now we're gonna talk about specialization, Aaliyah.
Great. So I mentioned before that there is some credit sharing that happens between our programs when students are pursuing a master's at the School of Social Work and a master's elsewhere. It's much more possible to do a dual degree when you're a full-time student. Our part-time students are in a different fee structure, and because of the way courses are scheduled, it can be kind of difficult to layer on another master's on top of a part-time MSW, though our students have done it. Most commonly, it's been a Master of Jurisprudence at the law school that our part-time students have done. Our part-time program is a completely clinical social work program as well. So some students find in the part-time program that they want to layer on more macro or sort of systemic change learning, and so they'll look at other degree programs to get that learning in. For our full-time program, we offer specializations in micro, meso, and macro level social work practice, so clinical social work, community-centered integrative practice, and administration and policy practice. Most of our concurrent degree students are in the administration and policy practice area because that really aligns well with the Master of Public Health or the Master of Public Administration. Though we do have some clinical social work students who will do a public health degree as well, and some community-centered integrated practice students who will do a master's in public administration. So all of them lend themselves well to a dual degree. It really is about sort of cobbling together a program of study that meets your learning needs as best as possible.
So kind of like what Aaliyah shared a little bit earlier in terms of the pros of a concurrent degree, right? Essentially, by combining your passion in social work along with another degree, it can kind of add on to that social work lens, right? Particularly with the focus on, person and environment, systems analysis, and social justice. And so again, it's that integrated practice, with a practical application of, public health. Is it policy? Is it law? And again, kind of like what Leah shared earlier, instead of 4 years, right, which is typical when you are pursuing, 2 degrees, it can be condensed in 3 years. Just to keep that in mind. And then, if you are in a place where you're kind of just exploring your concurrent degree options, we also do have certificates as well too. And I know, Leah, you can talk more about that.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest benefit of having a concurrent degree is that you're fully embedded in another department or another school on campus. You have access to scholars and faculty at another school. You're taking classes in another program with other students, and you're getting another degree at the school. That makes you really marketable in the workforce upon graduation. Having said that, a lot of times an MSW is enough for what students want to pursue post-grad. So if you're wanting to be a therapist or do clinical social work, you don't need another degree in order to do that. If you're wanting to do policy work or work at a think tank or work in, legislation, you don't need another degree in order to do that. An MSW will suffice for all of that. If you're wanting to do higher order healthcare policy and clinical work and sort of approach public health from a more, epidemiological perspective and do social work, then that's where having a dual degree makes sense. But if what you want to do is social work with more of a deep dive in another discipline, a certificate can also offer you a great alternative to getting another degree. One benefit of doing a certificate at the UW is that it does not add to your tuition at all. There are a lot of certificate programs at the UW. They typically are 5 to 6 classes, and you can double count 2 of those classes. So it means that you're going to be taking typically 1 extra course a quarter in your second year, but you don't have to pay anything. And you have access to the same faculty, the same departments, the same resources like career centers and other schools without having to pay for another degree and without having to be in school for another year. So you might want to research what certificates are offered. A lot of our students do the nonprofit management certificate program at the Evans School of Public Policy and Governance. There's a global health certificate at the School of Public Health that a lot of our students do. There's certificate programs in gerontology, bioethics, American Indian Studies, lots of programs that really align themselves well with social work. So you might want to do your research on that.
Okay, so let's say you do your concurrent degree. I mean, you get in both programs for your concurrent degree in MSW and the MPA. Once you're enrolled, that's when you will get support from me as the MSW academic advisor, who also focuses on concurrent students, tracking and planning out when to take your courses. And this would help shorten, I mean, not really just shorten, but just avoid complexities in your stay in the program. And so you will also be receiving practicum advising and support once you're admitted. And this would be through a field faculty in helping you decide and plan out your foundation and your advanced practicum. And depending on which additional degree, again, it's been mentioned a lot of times about potential complexities and rigor. And so just trying to be mindful on what, these, sorry, my dog is just howling downstairs. If you hear that, I'm so sorry. But anyway, there are some courses that cause conflicts with other degrees, and and so that's very important to kind of just plan out with an academic advisor when you'll be taking your courses. And of course, if you get into both programs, we always recommend students to start in the MSW degree. One reason for that is the practicum. As you probably have already seen, there are 2 practicums involved, which is a total of 10 credits for your foundation and 17 credits for your advanced practicum. And that alone is a lot of hours and a lot of work and a lot of effort that you would have to invest in. And so careful planning is really very important when you are doing concurrent degree in MSW and another program such as the MPA.
Yeah, so kind of building off what Janae has kind of shared, we also just want to make sure we are highlighting things that we believe is really important for you as you are considering pursuing a concurrent degree path. So, okay, well, it's in the middle, but anyways, so the first part is your tuition will likely be higher. Like I kind of mentioned earlier, MSW, our program and tuition is probably one of the most affordable on the entire campus. And the UW policy means that it would require students to enroll in the higher paying tuition program, whichever that looks like. So for example, if you're looking into an MSW and MPA, UW policy will default to an MPA because that is more expensive than an MSW. So just kind of consider the cost as you're thinking about this. And of course, it may disrupt the individual cohort experience because again, since you are pursuing 2 degrees at the same time, you might not necessarily be able to spend as much time in a specific cohort or in a specific school community, right? Because you're busy making sure you're going to classes, make sure you're doing like the field practicum, for example, or anything else that you may need that needs your attention versus spending time with a specific cohort. And then lastly, it may disrupt your flexibility of scheduling courses. I will say in the past, this hasn't been much of a hustle for MSW students because we have an amazing team to support you through that. However, it does mean that you have to be on top of this. You have to be mindful in terms of what classes you're planning in which quarter, right? Because if you are taking a more, if you, for example, if you're pursuing an MPA an MSW and Masters of Public Health, for example, that will look very, very drastic, and you have to be extremely mindful and careful about how you go about those classes, right? Again, it doesn't mean it's not impossible. It is possible. You just have to be on top of that. And of course, kind of like what Jenny and Ali have been saying throughout this entire presentation, strong organization and planning are key. And if you do decide to apply to MSW and you get in, you will be working directly with Jenny and Ali, who are here with me today. So there is support to help you with academic course planning.
Can I add one thing to that, Carol?
Yeah.
So I think the complexity really comes when students are enrolled in 2 graduate programs that have a core curriculum. So in the MSW program, your first year is really laid out for you. It's not until your spring quarter where there's room to take an elective, because quarter by quarter, we just have a number of courses that you need to take in sequence that are requirements for an MSW. And I know that the MPH and the MPA are very similar in that regard, as well as a JD. A lot of times we'll get questions around, can I get a law degree as well as an MSW at the same time? It's really, really challenging when there are core curricula for both graduate programs, because what it means is that you really have to be full-time at one school or another at one point. You really cannot be taking classes in both programs at the same time. We recommend that you start with your MSW. In rare occasions, you'll start at your MSW program, then you'll be in the other program for your second year. You might be able to tack on one MSW course occasionally that year, but it's not until your third year where you're doing a hybrid of both programs. And as far as the JD, that's a question that we get a lot of times from prospective students. That's nearly impossible to do just because it's a 3-year program. And the schedule for law school is very different than the rest of the UW. So registering and taking those classes looks really different than other master's programs. And so the schedule just doesn't align to take both at the same time. One other thing to add is that it's really impossible for advanced standing students to be in concurrent degree programs because advanced standing students also have, they're just packing their very expedited MSW with all their requirements, and to add on anything else in such a short amount of time is really difficult. Though we have had some students do it, but they're just here a lot longer and sort of extending their field practicum. But typically it's not doable for advanced standing students to be in another master's program at the same time.
Thank you, Leah. And for those who are unfamiliar with advanced standing, it's a track for those who have a BA in social work and social welfare. And the advanced standing is an expedited track where students can earn their MSW in 10 months. So thank you for adding that, Aaliyah. So before we get to questions, I just want to make sure that we are highlighting our amazing students and alumni. So for those who kind of, again, thinking about concurrent degree and don't really know what to expect, reach out to our alumni. We do have a couple of students who have done concurrent degrees, and you can ask about their experience, what is it like, how do they juggle, or if you're on the fence of, do you even want to pursue MSW, you can also ask that question with any of our alumni and even our current students as well too. So if you want to talk to our current students, we offer a virtual drop-in hour, which is hosted by 2 current students. They're wonderful. Their name is Mo and Summer. And again, we really care about making sure that you are getting all the information you need to make an informed decision. So feel free to ask very honest and blunt questions, and all our alumni and students will be more than happy to tell you how they really feel and how they navigate certain challenges, or how did they enjoy their time at the School of Social Work. And then lastly, tips for research planning and applying. So if you have not been able to look at our application materials, please do. And it is a lot. It is a lot of information. And so something to be mindful as you are pursuing a concurrent degree is kind of look at both requirements. No school is going to have the same requirements. So what we require for application may look differently for, the law school, or for the Evans School of Public Policy, or for public health, right? Be mindful of what each school is asking you. And of course, track these little things and be on top of that. And of course, if you are going to pursue 2 degrees, leverage resources at both schools, So the thing with UW in general is that each school is kind of siloed in some way. So, when you're talking to us, for example, ask us about our career development, ask us about our alumni. And just as I would hope you would ask us those same questions with the other school that you are considering a second master's with. Get all of that information you need to kind of help you plan and apply. Because ultimately, right, you need to decide what is it that you really need. First of all, is a concurrent degree right for you? Do you need to pursue an additional degree, or do you feel like an MSW will fit everything that you need? Kind of what Aaliyah was sharing earlier in the presentation, right? And then, of course, we also want to make sure we also want to normalize that at the end of the day, if you, decide on pursuing another path that does not require an MSW, we completely understand, right? Because, that's just kind of where you want to go with your career. So again, a lot of this thinking is really deciding for yourself what makes sense and where do you want to go with a concurrent degree if that's what you want, right? And then lastly, applications. So again, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, because each school operates differently, there will be different deadlines. So for us, our deadline is January 4th, which is around the corner. And then our offer will come out sometime in March. And again, that timeline will look differently depending on which second school that you're going to apply to. Just be mindful of those different deadlines. Lastly, again, like I mentioned, I am representing the admissions team. Continue to engage with us. We have an amazing calendar of upcoming events. Be sure to sign up with that. And also on our website, we also have a lot of recorded sessions. So today's session will also be recorded and be shared with you later and uploaded on our website. So that is the gist of how concurrent degrees will look like with the Masters of Social Work. So now we're going to open up to any questions that you all may have. So yeah, feel free to ask your questions in the chat or raise your hand, and then we can kind of call on you. Were there any other program that we didn't mention? I know we talked a lot about MPA, MPH, JD. MBA. Aaliyah, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to start about the MBA?
Well, you can start and I can add on.
I can start. So Michael, MBA is one of those programs where I feel like you really, I know we've been talking about it, but really ask yourself why an MBA, right? For example, Eileen and I were recently talking to another prospective student who was interested in exploring MBA and an MSW. And the way they describe it was like, well, I want to make change. I want to make policy change from a business level, right? Like from a high up senior level leadership, making policy changes that includes like social work practices, right? And for me, that sounds like an MPA, because MPA is policy changes, right? So for me, my question to you is, why an MBA? What do you want to do with that ultimately? Do you need an MBA to do that kind of work? Where does that fit within your career path? I'm gonna stop there, Lee. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think a concurrent degree path can really be the perfect program of study for a student pursuing an MSW, as long as you're very clear about what's the added benefit of the other degree. Because an MSW is so versatile, you can do virtually anything with a Master of Social Work. And there can be some real expansive learning done in other programs on campus that maybe you're not going to get the hard skills around financial management necessarily at the School of Social Work. We have a couple classes, but if you want to be spending like a year or two on that, or thinking about corporate social responsibility, then it might make sense for you to add on an MBA. But I think that's a question that the added benefit question is something that everyone should ask when they're thinking about a concurrent degree. In terms of some other programs, like I mentioned, bioethics is something that we've seen recently. We've also had a few students in the Master's in Applied International Studies program. So people who are really interested in thinking about globalization and development and bringing a social work perspective to global change work, that can be a nice fit. But again, those are things that I think as a MSW myself and a big cheerleader of the field, I do think that an MSW alone opens a lot of doors. Sometimes you have to make a case for yourself with prospective employers around how an MSW has prepared you for that kind of work if it's a little untraditional. But oftentimes a second degree is not necessary to do the kind of work that you want to do.
Yeah, thanks, Aaliyah. We have a great question from Michelle. Could you expand on the differences in potential career paths and or skills learned between an MPH/MSW and MPA and an MSW degree?
Yeah, I don't know, Janae, would you want to tackle that and I can chime in?
Sorry, Ali, I'd rather have you start on this one.
Sure. So I think for the MPA, skills learned in the MPA and MSW program. So MPA really focuses on administration and policy practice. And so we do have in the MSW program the 1-year specialization in APP. But if you're tacking on an MPA, you're tacking on a whole other core curriculum focused on administration and policy practice. And so you're learning a lot of fundamentals around how to write a policy brief. I think it is a lot more focus on financial management, grant writing, things like that. For an MPH, it's much more focused on public health practice. So you're going to be taking a biostats class, you're going to be taking epidemiology. People who are focusing on an MPH MSW, typically they're going into healthcare practice after they graduate. If you want to be a medical social worker, you don't need an MPH in order to do that. A good percentage of our graduates, I want to say like 20% of our graduates are working in healthcare or hospital systems. If you're doing direct practice with patients, you don't need an MPH in order to do that. But if you're trying to revolutionize or reform healthcare settings, or if you're thinking about health policy and public health intervention and prevention work from a social work perspective, then an MPH MSW would be a good fit. Same with MPA MSW. You don't need an MPA in order to do policy work. An MSW would be enough. I think an MPA MSW opens a lot of doors in Seattle. The Evans School is really well networked in the region. And if you want to go and work in the policy arena, like in doing government work, or if you want to work at a think tank, you know, there are a lot of foundations based in Seattle that are doing, you know, system change work, like the Gates Foundation. Then an MPA will open a lot of doors. And I think you'll gain some good hard skills in an MPA program, but you can also take those classes as electives, or you can do a certificate. So I think for an MPA, it might be a little bit more about networking than the MPH, where you're really gaining some substantive hard skills that you can only get through the school of public health. Janae, I don't know if you agree with that assessment.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think one thing to kind of just think about is after graduation and like your career, what your career path looks like, what population would you really want to work with? And that includes the scope. So are you trying to do direct practice? Are you trying to do more of community work, or a more, a certain focus on a certain population? Those also kind of, those help determine what the focus or what you should be really, focusing on doing, and, what skill sets you're wanting to gain from either or both programs that you would acquire in the UW on top of like the MSW.
Awesome. And then Michael had another question in the chat asking about statements. How much real estate do you recommend we allocate to explaining our intentions for a dual degree? Is more than a sentence or two necessary? So at least for the School of Social Work, we don't necessarily need you to mention you're going to pursue a dual degree. However, if it's important to your story, important to your narrative for you to mention, like for example, like kind of what Aaliyah was sharing earlier about like social impact, right? If social impact is something that's really meaningful for you and you want to kind of include both elements of social work and elements of business, you can mention that. But kind of going back to what I shared earlier, because to apply to two different programs are so different, like I'm not going to see what you apply to another school, you know what I'm saying? So it's not like you need to declare that in any way in your statement, but if it's important for you to share that, you can include that. So you may, it's optional, it's up to you. It's not like you need to. Awesome. So another question. I'm currently a third-year undergrad. Any recommendations on things I can do to boost my application? When you're talking about booster application, you're talking about the MSW application. I'm going to assume that it is. It's really hard for me to say because I don't really know what your background looks like. However, if you do, again, review our application instructions, it kind of lays out what is it that we really value. And also when you look at all the questions, it's really rooted in what are you passionate about? Why are you pursuing an MSW? What kind of change do you want to impact in which community, right? Like which scope that you really want to pursue? Because our requisite essentially is, have your bachelor's and have the minimum GPA requirement. And of course, there are some hours too. So also depends on your either your paid work, your internship work, how have you been volunteering? We do also kind of ask you to kind of put together which communities you serve through volunteer work. Again, a lot of that is on our social experience form, which again, review the application materials because it's a lot and it could be very dense. But in general, those are the key components that kind of give you what we're looking for. And so if you are applying right after undergrad, that is totally normal and totally okay as well too. And please let me know if you want me to clarify any of the answers that I just shared. Oh, and another thing too, so to that person, earlier I kind of shared information on connecting with alumni and current students. That would be a great question to ask them, right? There are actually a couple alumni who went straight from our Bachelor's of Social Welfare straight into an MSW. You can always ask them about their experience and how they've done that. But again, just kind of going back to what I said earlier, like really do your research about what we're asking for, what are our values, does this make sense? We're not like a, an MPA program, for example, where we're like, you need to have a strong quantitative background, for example, like that. And by no means, we're not looking at that. It's more about where you're coming from and how do we, the School of Social Work and MSW, fit into terms of your path and your desire to be here. Any other questions? Okay, I will go ahead and stop recording, but I'll be here for a little bit longer. So for those who want to still chat about anything, definitely feel free to chat with us. But I'm gonna stop recording for now.